a matchup in college basketball that will feature number 1 UConn against number 15 Creighton, as it says on the screen. It will take place tonight. So, Josh, before you dive into this game, I'm gonna go on a little bit of an anecdote again, if you don't mind. And this is the reason why I don't particularly talk a ton of college basketball until we get to the March Madness tournament.
Sure.
If you look at an NBA mock draft as of today, there is only one or two players in an NBA mock draft in the top 10 that are from a college. The NBA, wrongfully, in my opinion, has not embraced college basketball the way the NFL has seemingly endorsed college football. And the NFL and college football are almost in lockstep to the point where it's almost a working partnership in some ways with how much they inter promote each other. The NBA doesn't do any of that. The NBA is all about the G League, which really should be for developmental, not extended college for kids. Though I get it from the kids' perspective, as I've said. Obviously, I would skip college and go straight to professional too if I was allowed to. It's the international players, and it is the G League basically taking over college basketball. And Adam Silver even addressed this during his media tour over All Star Weekend. But this year in college basketball, there's not a ton of stars again. UConn, Purdue, Kansas, North Carolina, Duke, the regulars that are always in there. But as we go into previewing this matchup, like this is one of those matchups that I think in the NCAA tournament, you're going to see again this year what we saw last year, which is a bunch of upsets, unpredictability, maybe not well known brands potentially making the Elite Eight and the Final Four, which, depending on who you talk to, is a good thing or a bad thing. But I think it is hurting the product that we really, in my opinion, do not have the next generation of NBA stars in college basketball. It makes it so hard to watch, in my opinion.
And that's fair. Like, Victor Wembanyama, the guy who was drafted number 1 overall. He was touted as this generational talent, and yet did he come from Kansas? No. Did he come from Duke? No. North Carolina? No. UConn? No. He came from the French. International game, I should say more. I get that that's kind of a different example, if you will, but it applies to what you're overall saying, I believe.
Can I tell you? I just went back and looked up the W or not the WNBA. I apologize. The 10 picks of last year's NBA draft,
Yeah.
and Victor Wembanyama overseas. Now, Brandon Miller did come from Alabama, but obviously he had a lot of baggage. And they got eliminated very quickly in the tournament. Scoot Henderson from the G League, the Thompson brothers from the G League, Anthony Black in Orlando, who obviously, not a great player from Arkansas. Now, Bilal Adabi overseas, Therese Walker from Houston, Awer Hendricks from UCF. Again, okay schools. Houston was pretty good last year. And then Cason Wallace from Kentucky. You haven't heard a lot about these rookies in the NBA because I think that it is, again, hurting the draft because we don't have kids developing in college. They're developing for 1 year in the G League and they are going to the NBA with not a lot of experience. And it takes them 4 to 5 years to become a legitimate NBA player.
Right. I agree with you on that. But looking at this matchup, you have UConn at 24-2, and they're number 1 in the country, as you see. They're on the road tonight, taking on Creighton. Creighton defeated Butler 79-57 on Saturday. Creighton's 11-2 at home, and they're 3-2 in games decided by 3 points or less. So that could be big if this game comes down to the final seconds and it's like a 3-point game or something like that. However, this is a Big East game, and UConn is 14-1 against Big East conference foes. Baylor Shireman is scoring 18.7 points per game for Creighton, and then you have Ryan Kalkbrenner, the big man. He's averaging about 17 points per game for the Blue Jays. Then you've got both Cam Spencer and Tristan Newton, both averaging about 15 points per game for UConn. UConn is 10-0 in their last 10 games. Creighton is 7-3 in their last 10 games. And UConn won the first matchup against Creighton 62-48. So all the pieces are in place for this to be a very good game. I definitely am planning on watching, but I would favor UConn in this game, even though they are on the road. I think since they are the national champions, they are going to be familiar with this type of situation. I don't think they'll be overwhelmed by the environment. And I would say UConn is probably going to win. I'm going to say 72-69.
which would barely cover the spread. UConn is favored by 2.5.
Before we move on from this topic, let me just ask you this super quick. A lot of times with men's college basketball, because of the two-half format that they go with, you get a lot of games that are like 72-68 or 69-63 type of games, for example. Do you like that men's college basketball uses that format, or would you prefer them to follow the route of the NBA and go to the four quarters that are
It's
12?
an interesting concept. I know that obviously women's college basketball goes to the four quarters.
Yes.
Um, I do think it's been a staple of college basketball for so long that it'd be a weird adjustment to do so. And tournament wise, I think it does create an opportunity for more upsets, is what I think everybody cares about in March Madness is those Cinderella stories. Of course, famously Loyola of Chicago making it to the Final Four a few years ago. So no, I don't have a problem with it because I don't think the college kids get as fatigued, obviously, as NBA players. It is 40 minutes versus 48, which I think a bigger deal than the two halves. And I think that the game does go a little bit faster when you do the two halves versus the four quarters.
Okay. My one response to that would be, excuse me, but my one response to that would be this. You were talking about the NBA draft and the lack of like big name college players. I will say this. If you switch the college game to four quarters that are 12 minutes longer, whatever, it would get them more adjusted to the NBA game.
That it would.
So do you think, not saying that's enough to, change the format, but
I think if you do that, you have to put it to 12 minutes and make it the NBA clock, which I don't think college basketball wants to do.
fair enough. And by no means am I advocating that it should happen, but at the same time, I feel like it's a very valid question.